Is this on? I'm not sure. Yes, all right. Welcome here to the Bonn Historic Town Hall on behalf of the City of Bonn and the Right Livelihood College. My name is Irene Quayle. I'm an environment journalist, and I am very much looking forward to chairing our public session this evening. Later on, we'll be giving you a chance to put some questions to our special guests. But first, I'd like to hand you over to our official guests to get the proper welcome. So first of all, Reinhard Limbach, the Deputy Mayor of Bonn, would like to welcome you to Africa Greening the Future.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, a warm welcome to all of you who have come to our old town hall tonight. Today we are continuing a good tradition that we started nearly 10 years ago. We bring laureates of the Right Livelihood Awards, the so-called alternative Nobel Prize winners, to the public stage in Bonn. We did this for the first time in 2010 when the City of Bonn, in a joint effort with other partners, hosted the 30th anniversary conference of the Right Livelihood Awards. At the time, we invited all laureates who had received the Right Livelihood Award up to that point to come to Bonn. Ever since, we have had the opportunity of welcoming laureates of the Right Livelihood Award here in Bonn once or twice a year. In our public talks, we all have the chance to get in touch with the awardees and their valuable work. We owe this special opportunity to the great work of the campus of the Right Livelihood College here in Bonn, which was founded shortly after the 2010 anniversary conference. Every year since it starts, the RLC campus Bonn has invited laureates and young scientists from various continents to discuss their work and promote collaboration. The campus thus serves as an international incubator for developing, promoting and multiplying science-based practical solutions for sustainable development. Amazingly enough, next year we'll already see the 10th anniversary of the Bonn campus of the RLC. The Committee for International Affairs and Science of the City of Bonn, of the Bonn City Council, has just decided that this engagement should be honored in a special way. In 2020, the RLC will become the annual partner of the City of Bonn. Special events and information campaigns will raise awareness and visibility for the important work of our partner organizations. In fact, we will cherish our long-standing and very fruitful cooperation between the RLC and the City of Bonn. My thanks goes to the very dedicated team of the RLC here in Bonn, in particular to Dr. Till Stellmacher and his colleagues. And at this point, please allow me also to extend a special welcome to the group of young researchers who have come together here in our city. In a joint workshop with the laureates of the Alternative Nobel Prize, they will have the opportunity to meet and discuss a number of relevant issues throughout the week. I wish you a good stay in Bonn, and I hope to see you here again in future. Another special word of thanks goes, of course, to the Right Livelihood Award Foundation itself, which is represented here tonight through Dr. Juliane Kronen. A warm welcome to you as well. The foundation does very laudable work to support people who have found valuable and practical solutions to make our world more sustainable. The award helps raise awareness for the awardees' important work. This goes along with a better acknowledgement and very often also with the protection of the laureates who are working in very exposed situations. I'm sure we will hear more about this from Dr. Kronen, who will speak to us in a minute. Last, but surely not least, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to our two panelists, Tony Rinaudo and Wycliffe Matika. I hope you have had a safe trip to Bonn and will have a fruitful stay. Your work has received numerous recognitions and lots of praise. It also has been acknowledged in documentaries and films. I'm very curious to hear more about it, and I'm very sure that the audience in the hall here today is longing to hear more from you as well. In Bonn you will find many like-minded people and institutions working for similar objectives. In the International Bonn, sustainability perspective serves as our common umbrella. Institutions like the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, CIFOR, Center for International Forestry Research, EFI, the European Forest Institute, the Forest Stewardship Council, IPBES, and the Global Crop Diversity Trust, to name just a few of the like-minded organizations in Bonn, are working in similar fields here. Representatives of these organizations take a big interest in your work and are here with us tonight. Thus I will end my words and of welcome here so that we can hear more from Mr. Rinaudo and Mr. Matika at this point, which I believe is the true reason why most of us are here. I trust this will be an inspiring evening for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Limbach. Now I'd like to ask Dr. Juliane Kronen from the Right Livelihood Foundation to say a few words. I'm delighted to say that we've had to get some more chairs in at the back. It would have been standing room only, so thank you. It's great to see such a great response.
Mr. Mayor, Dr. Quayle, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to thank on behalf of the Right Livelihood Award Foundation for being here at this historic and impressive place again, and for having the, we just counted at the 15th seminar at least here in Bonn. And let me explain a little bit, what does the Right Livelihood Award Foundation do, what is so special about Bonn for us, and what is so special about the laureates we're having here today. I just realized driving here that we talk about the Green Belt movement, and somehow my subconscious picked this jacket this morning. The Right Livelihood Award Foundation is now celebrating its 40th anniversary, so we're going to have the 40th award ceremony in Stockholm this year. We're going to announce this year's laureates next Thursday on the 25th, so stay tuned, 10 a.m. and Stockholm, you're going to learn who are going to be the new laureates this year. The Right Livelihood Award Foundation was founded when our founder, Jakob von Uexküll, wanted to donate an extra Nobel Prize for the environment. He went to the Nobel Foundation and said, you know, your single categories of the award, they don't really resolve today's problems. Today's problems are much more interconnected. We need something for the environment and human development. And the Nobel Committee said, great idea, thank you very much, but Alfred Nobel has defined the list of prizes. Very sorry, we can't do that. Which isn't true, because the Nobel Prize for the Economics was actually added by a private bank later on. So anyway, he thought the idea is good enough to give a voice to those people who find practical solutions for the most urgent problems on this planet. And that is what the foundation does. It honors people and courageous people who solve the global problems on this planet. He said, let's do it anyway. I got a lot of good feedback, and I believe that as long as the idea is good and the need is there to support those people, to honor them, to protect them, we will get the funding somehow. And now that has been going on for 40 years. We have 175 laureates in over, I think, 63 countries. About a third of our laureates are women or women-led organizations. They're spread across the globe, not just as in other awards with a heavy emphasis on the global north. We call them our lighthouses of hope. And the two laureates we have here with us especially show that a change for the better is possible. You don't have to accept things as they are. I'm going to talk about our tree planting laureates in a moment. But let me show you why is Bonn so special for us. Bonn is really the hub of the educational work of the Right Livelihood Award Foundation. Every laureate becomes, when you receive the award, becomes a fellow of the Right Livelihood College. Now, mind that most of our laureates don't have an academic background, and this is an incredible, valuable link of bringing their knowledge into academia, discussing with students from all over the world, documenting the stuff. We're building a library on our laureates' works at the Institute for Higher Education in Geneva, where we have a second office. That helps especially with those laureates involved with human rights works, because Geneva is they call themselves the capital of humanism, so that's where we have a second office, and we're just building this library to really document and capture. So we also need those films we're going to show here in Geneva. So that is so special about Bonn, and Bonn is the global secretariat for all the, 8 campuses we have now around the globe? 9, okay, I missed the last one. On all continents, that is actually where students discuss with our laureates. We've just learned that the Center for Desertification Research is located in Bonn, so that's a especially good mix with the trees. Let me share a little bit about the laureates we have here. Wangari Maathai, who founded the Green Belt movement, she received the Right Livelihood Award in 1984 for really reshaping the country and the vegetation. And I think it's a great example to see how an idea is carrying on, and the foundation always regards itself a little bit as a scouting system for what's happening, because 20 years later, Wangari Maathai was rewarded with the Peace Nobel Prize. And we have a second laureate, Dr. Denis Mukwege from Congo, who received our award in 2013 and the Peace Nobel Prize later. So we're a little bit a scouting unit for people who are really changing and really creating incredible positive impact on this planet. Last year we had two laureates dealing with reforestation at the same time. Tony, you got the award for demonstrating on a large scale how drylands can be greened at minimal cost, improving the livelihoods of millions, and what was very important, you teach people how to take care of themselves and how to prune the roots of the trees which are still left there. We're going to learn about that. And what impressed me most when you gave your acceptance speech were two things. First of all, you said it's not only a thing about trees, it's about giving people their dignity back and giving them the possibility to shape their own destiny with their own hands. And I think that is the biggest, it's not to belittle the millions of trees you have planted, but that is what we're looking for, people who make impact along several categories. And then we gave an award to Yakuba Savadogo from Burkina Faso, who has combined an ancient strategy, an ancient method of planting trees with very low resources and really growing forests on barren land and combining this indigenous and innovative knowledge. Another great example of how you can turn around things and how you can make sure the vector shows in the right direction again. The last sentence, many of our laureates are characterized by this combination of being both visionary but being very practical at the same time. There are people who have theories how to save the planet, and there are people who are doing incredible things but without changing the prerequisites and changing the conditions. And our laureates always do both. And they do that with an incredible motivation, an incredible determination. They are sustainable in terms of doing that usually for a very, very long time. We're looking for ideas which have a future, and I think Wangari Maathai got the award in 1984. You're still around. There are a lot of plant growing movements around the world. The Plant for the Planet has been inspired by Wangari Maathai. Now even the Consular Corps in Germany is doing tree planting events. Just got an invitation for that. So planting trees is the thing to do. I saw this ad saying there is a medicinal plant for the climate crisis. It's called a tree. And we see all of those little activities going on even here, not just around the world somewhere, but actually starting here. And last night, Klaus Töpfer, a former Minister of the Environment in Germany, who also worked on the UN level, got the prize of the state of North Rhine-Westphalia here in Bonn. And he said in his speech, the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. The last thing, as I said, our laureates are practical, they are visionary, and I think they don't take things as they are. They're just determined to make a change. And I will close with Tony, your final word at your acceptance speech. Tony Rinaudo said, if you read my name backward, it says, why not? Thank you very much. I hope we're going to have a great discussion, and thanks again for coming.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cronin. So, as we've heard, we're very fortunate this evening to have two speakers with us who each, in their own way, has played and is playing a major role in greening the desert. Now, once upon a time, greening Africa, greening the desert would have sounded like science fiction, but these two who are with us this evening have shown us that this is possible, and they can turn dry lands into thriving green spaces using simple techniques, not with a lot of money, and also involving local communities. So they are helping to protect the environment, helping us to deal with climate change, and above all, as you said too, they give people a sustainable and a worthwhile livelihood. So by way of introduction, we have two short trailers about each of their work. So we're going to start with Wycliffe, and we'll have the second one after that. Oops. Perhaps I'll just use the time in between to say that the organization has planted more than 51 million trees in Kenya alone. Wycliffe works with the Greenbelt movement, which, as we heard, was set up by the now legendary Wangari, Maathai, and I'm sure our technology is going to work very shortly. Otherwise, we are just going to improvise and talk to you about the work of Tony and Wycliffe. But that would be a shame, because the film is coming, and we are also, by the way, being recorded. This is being streamed live on the internet as we speak. So enjoy.
Water. Why not plant trees? I asked the women. And so they just started very, very, very small, very, very small. And before too long, they started showing each other. It was now communities empowering
So thank you for that brief introduction to the organisation which is represented here tonight by Wycliffe Matika. Would you like to join me? We could actually go onto the stage. And we're very much looking forward to hearing more this evening about your experiences.
Thank you.
Also, whether you are still disobedient on occasion, and how you are continuing with the legacy and the heritage of that great lady, Wangari Maathai. Our other guest this evening is Tony Rinaudo. He is known as the Forest Maker, which is quite a title, I think. He was awarded, as we heard, the Alternative Nobel Prize in 2018, and now we're going to watch a trailer from a documentary film about Tony and his work. There is a story to the film as well, because it's part of a documentary being made by Volker Schlöndorff, the famous German filmmaker, and he actually allowed us, he sent us this little excerpt, a trailer from the film, with permission to show it this evening. He would have liked to have joined us, but he couldn't make it. But, well, let's watch and enjoy.
Imagine we could spread this message around the globe and achieve restoration on an unprecedented scale.
I firmly believe that with the right production methods, Africa could easily feed the world.
I'm very grateful to Volker Schlönder for that sneak preview. You can look out for the documentary sometime.
Imagine.
Oops.
Trees could be growing on degraded land. Imagine. Desertification could be stopped. Hundreds of millions would not have to leave their homes.
Technology. Sorry? It's stereo film technology. Sorry, this is getting a little like Mr. Bean. It can only be a matter of...
Okay, now we will go analog and no more technical problems.
Oh, okay, that sounds great. So, thank you very much to both of you for being here, and we very much enjoyed those two extracts. The first film extract which we saw will also be shown in full here in Bonn on the 29th of September at the film fair at the Woki Cinema, and at some point in the not too distant future, please look out for the other documentary about Tony and his work. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think you'll agree that we have seen some very exciting projects in the two film trailers. They can make even me feel optimistic. Sometimes I find that hard right now with all the worrying headlines, the negative headlines, climate change, fires in the Amazon, the Arctic is melting, extreme weather. Even here in Germany, we're having trouble getting enough water for the crops and the trees. And isn't it great to see something that gives us a message of hope? So I'm sure we're very keen to hear from both of our speakers a little bit more about that. I'd like to start with Tony. Tony, and ask you, how did you first get the idea of greening areas that looked anything but green in the first place?
Is this on?
I think it should be. Are we on?
Is that on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Irene. I don't know where it came from, but I can distinctly remember every Sunday after lunch, our parents piled us children into the car and we drove 30 kilometres to the next city where my grandparents lived. And on the way, there was a certain point where you come up to a rise and then the country opened out. And then bang, straight in front of your eyes is this bare mountain range. And I was on that hill in my mind's eye, in my gumboots, shovel in hand, and I was planting trees and wondering why on earth, what possessed those farmers to take out every tree? Don't they know that trees are necessary? So that's when it started.
And at the beginning, did people think you were a bit mad?
Well, in Niger, so now jumping fast forward
Right.
many years.
So it's we were in Australia first,
As
where
a
you grew
child,
up, and then to Niger.
Then in Niger, when we first landed there, I was in charge of a small reforestation project, and we were encouraging communities to plant trees in windbreak formation and woodlots, because wind erosion and destruction of the crops was a very serious issue, and there was a shortage of wood. And if you can imagine, in one of the poorest countries of the world, and people desperately wanting to plant their food crops and cash crops on every inch of ground, what it must have sounded like to have this white guy say, you know, we really need to plant trees. And they actually called me the crazy white farmer.
Uh-huh. Nowadays they also call you the forest maker. That sounds like quite a tall order to live up to.
Well, it's very interesting. The marketers and the media people have lots of fun at my expense. But what I like to say is actually 95% of my time is spent re-greening mindscapes. And if I can win the battle to help people understand you will have a better future and your children will have a better life if you plant trees, if you regenerate trees in this landscape, then the battle is won. because when you give nature a chance, it will actually heal itself. So I'm more a mindscape regreener than a forest snake.
Okay, let's come to Wycliffe. Matika, Wycliffe, what inspired you to join the Green Belt movement and to become involved in tree planting and in greening Africa?
Thank you so much. I think on behalf of the Green Belt movement, all the way from Kenya, we are really extremely honored to be here after 35 years of receiving this award.
Our pleasure.
And all protocol observed, we are glad to share also again what has happened after the 35 years. The inspiration and the vision of Professor Wangari Maathai is about humans and humans, the nexus of the soil, and going back to naturalness. That is where the solution lies. And the movement is simple, is simplistic. We simplify the solutions. We go back, appreciate the local knowledge as assets, as building blocks. That is why you saw in the curtain raiser the community mobilize, appreciating the community's role, appreciating the community's attitude, the community's skills, and amplifying all those in development policies and agenda. But what keeps on inspiring us is the challenge that we are facing today, the climate change and its manifestation. Thank you.
Do you think that things have changed over the last 35 years? Have some things become more taken for granted than at that time? We saw in the film how it was about disobedience. There were also different attitudes towards women and their role in society. Do you think that things are different today, and is it easier for your organization to carry on its work, or is it still difficult?
Thank you so much. I think the vision of the Green Belt movement was a very huge vision. And it was with one of the gifted leaders who left us. And I must confess that it was not easy after her demise. And therefore her legacy is being now immortalized in 3 different institutions. The Green Belt movement focuses on the environmental restoration component, but there is a university, Wangari Maathai University of Peace. There's also the Wangari Maathai Foundation. I must admit that yes, the challenges are there, but the tide has changed. We are seeing more allies, particularly in terms of policy, particularly in terms of constitutionalism, because she was an ardent crusader for constitution, the rule of law, justice, equity, and fairness. We are seeing a platform where the government is getting responsive regional integration to tackle the common issues that are affecting the communities.
Thank you. Tony, if you looked at how things have developed since you started out, since you first started to green, how do you think the situation has changed since then and people's attitudes?
So there's been an enormous upswing in interest and support for the work that I do. Initially I was in some back corner that wasn't very well known, so rural part of Niger Republic on a borderland to the Sahara Desert. And for the first 18 years when we lived there, initially it was quite a struggle. Once we discovered actually there's an underground forest here, we needed to convince the farmers, and that was an ongoing process for some time. Surprisingly, even though there was impact and the obvious spread of reforestation, the people who you would expect to embrace it, the educated, the wealthy, the people who are interested in restoration, it took a long time to convince them. But today, with great awareness on climate change and the imperative that we must act and act quickly, and with the ability to restore vegetation at low cost, very rapidly and at scale, there's incredible interest. Even in just the last few years, there's been an enormous upswing. And I must say, the city of Bonn plays a role in that. A declaration was made here, the Bonn Challenge. Let's restore, let's work together and restore 350 million hectares of degraded land worldwide by 2030. So it's initiatives like this and the financing that comes afterwards that's totally changed the situation on restoration.
How important is it to involve the community, the local people, in these initiatives?
Oh, extremely. So if it took people to reduce the landscape to a point where it was unable to support life on Earth, it was going to take people to reverse that situation. What are the beliefs about trees, the negative attitudes and the destructive practices that reduce the ecosystem to its knees? And if we could address those and challenge people gently, politely, but challenge them, what future do you want? And if you continue on this path, where will you end up? And then offer an alternative. And fortunately now we do have a scalable way of doing this in a way that's within reach of even the poorest farmers. Then we can work with these communities and reverse the damage.
Wycliffe, has it also been your experience that working from the ground up, grassroots, is the key?
Thank you so much. I think communities are very central and primary in the work that we do. And within our philosophy, we strongly believe that we need to build consciousness as a precondition to environmental action. We had a theory of change where we are looking at if communities are able to understand the fundamental linkages between their action, then they are able to master energies and take corrective actions. In the work that we do, we invest so much in knowledge and sensitization, where solutions are planted in the mind, solutions are planted in the heart, and we look across the entire strata of the community. We look at the youth, we look at the women, we look at the men, we look at structures like are there councils, are there elderly, and what are the traditional values, what are the values that they cherish that help in the restoration, but again also in improving life. So communities are cornerstone in the work that we are doing. In Kenya we have a robust network, and we call it the social fence. It's a social fence across all the key water towers. We have 5 major water towers, and Green Belt Movement has created a robust network of more than 5,000 women groups.
Now, at the same time, sort of the local is very important, the grassroots communities, but just recently, tree planting has become in. It has been very much at the center of the media, the idea being that we could save the climate, we have to plant trees globally everywhere to try to absorb our greenhouse gas emissions and so on. But how does all that fit, or how do you feel when you hear that and compare it with your local initiatives? How do they fit together? Do they fit together?
So my experience was we started in 12 villages, and then in 1984 there was a particular situation and we lifted it to 100 villages, and it worked. And in time, through sending agents across the country to teach other communities, in receiving visitors, come and spend a day with our community, learn from them, in time it reached 50% of the farmland of Niger. In 1999 we returned to Australia, I joined World Vision, and I thought, with an incremental increase in effort, we could have an exponential increase in impact. And so in 2012, we joined forces with the World Agroforestry Centre, and we had an international conference in Nairobi, and it alerted the whole of East Africa. Government officials, NGOs, farmers groups, donors, they'd never heard of farmer management to regeneration before. And that was the catalyst for what we're seeing now, great expansion of FMNR across a number of nations. And then we replicated that in Malawi and then more recently in Mali. So it really is now a global movement. And so I think the two are connected. I do believe in starting small, proof of concept, but then building on what you've learned and then pushing the boundaries. Can we take this further?
Is there a danger that with the global interest that big corporations, governments, large-scale entities could take over and not pay enough regard to the smallholders, the small farmers?
It would be very foolish. There's certainly a danger, but almost everywhere on the world there are people who have lived in those landscapes for generations, and to ignore them and their rights, plus the contribution that they could make, would be very foolish. And in the past there were a number of re-greening efforts that had a top-down approach. They come in and told people what to do. Well, when the last dollar is spent, you can be certain the last tree was planted. And for the people who had a rightful claim to that land, over time they'll more likely than not cut those trees out anyway. We must engage with the local stakeholders.
Wycliffe, how would you feel about that when you hear of the global interest in planting trees in the interests of the global climate? How does that fit in with your work on the ground?
Thank you so much. I think and this is a common phenomenon in Africa. We are below the UN threshold of 10%, and most national jurisdictions, particularly in Kenya, in our constitutional articles, Article 69 to be particular, has emphasized the need of a 10% tree cover for every green spaces that we have, and therefore we are below. Yes, we want our aspirations looking at the global increased canopies, but even at local level, national level, we are below. In Kenya, we are doing about 2%, and that's the forest and tree cover. It's below, well below. Yeah, we are acting locally in Africa, and we have set targets for ourselves. We have the Afri initiatives, Afri 100 initiatives, where the nations, and currently more than 29 nations have come together for a treaty to have 100 million hectares of the landscapes restored by 2020. And we are doing every efforts to contribute to such continental, but again also they feed into the global targets.
Now, you've both been here in Bonn at a workshop with many of the talented young people who are with us in the audience here this evening, organized by the Right Livelihood College. What have you got out of that workshop so far?
So I'm actually very encouraged. Such bright, intelligent young people working on solutions to life and death issues for many, many people. So it's just wonderful to see young people dedicating their life to research and to finding solutions for big issues.
Did it give you any particular impetus, or what are you going to take back from it?
Well, I think what I've always been aware and even engaged with young people, it's even more important, I think, than before, because they are the future. And we're moving on, like it or not, but it's the young people that are going to carry the weight of the problems they inherit. So I think we need to really listen to young people. We need to give them space and encourage them in what we're doing. And along those lines, what Fridays for the Future are doing is very, very important.
Wycliffe, how have you experienced the workshop? What have you taken out of it over the past 2 days so far?
Quite inspiring, looking at energetic and enthusiastic young people. looking for solutions, but in a simple way, but also appreciating the fact that there are still challenges in terms of food and forestry, and we need to do more. I must confess the work that we do is science-driven and knowledge-driven, and the practicing laureates, we are very happy to come and get feedback from them. Tell them these are the gaps, and this is not working. What are you doing in academia? So quite a good nexus, what is happening in the labs, what is happening in the halls of residence, in the academic halls, and what is happening experientially from the.
So you have that has been coming together here over the past.
That is coming out to discuss different concepts, different jurisdictions, but how we involve people, that's our key interest. How do we make sure that community ownership, knowledge, traditional knowledge in the work that we do.
And how do we spread that message, do you think, today?
Thank you so much. I think we are impressing the social media, which is quite very active, and if well harnessed, it has the potential, because when the Green Belt movement started, the media, the mainstream media, was not very active, but currently there's so much innovation, and it's easy to publicize and reach more people with these solutions.
Social media, is that something which is increasingly playing a role for you too? Presumably that's also something which has changed tremendously in the years that you've been working.
It certainly is. It's not something that I'm very competent at, but others, my wife, the team that I work with in World Vision and Right Livelihoods and others certainly use that card extensively.
Yeah, that's great. When you talk about farmer-managed natural regeneration, how transferable is that to other parts of the world?
So it's quite amazing, really. I've had the privilege of travelling to many parts of the world, from hyper-arid areas to the foothills of the Himalayas to very humid tropical countries, and the principles stay the same. So if you have a tree species that coppices, one that sprouts after you cut it, then you can apply these principles of selection, thinning, and pruning, the regrowth that comes from those tree stumps. But even in the absence of tree stumps, while on one level we're talking about managing trees, on a bigger level we're talking about managing landscapes. And if we change our destructive practices, the extensive and repetitive use of fire, the complete removal of woody biomass year after year after year, the ploughing of every square inch of farmland, and the constant stocking and overgrazing of land, if we modify those behaviours, it gives nature wriggle room to resprout. Very often there are latent seeds in the ground, but we've found that even in the absence of seed, if you make those changes to behaviour, nature itself, through the wind, through water, through birds and animals, nature itself will bring those seeds in, and they'll find a favourable environment for germination and growth. It's exciting.
It's very exciting, yes. Wycliffe, do you also do you see your work as being limited to Africa, or is it also something the rest of us can learn from?
I think, and we have had a paradigm shift. When we started, we were talking about tree planting, and we realized we must make sure that the trees grow and survive. So we have changed in our approach. We are using a watershed-based approach, and every tree counts. Therefore, we are looking at tree growing, which is more careful. we tracked that for more than 3 years. I must say now that we have had one leaders express tree as a symbol of commitment to so many other things. It is great for us to see African leaders, particularly the African Union, have set aside the 3rd of every March as the African Environment Day, but also Wangari Maathai Day. Every year, this year we celebrated with the First Lady, and we build more consciousness about the ills, about the challenges, about any phenomenon that is changing, that we need to find solutions. We must, I must admit that yes, the model and the work of Professor Wangari Maathai in different jurisdictions is being emulated and is being immortalized. So not only Kenyan, not only African, but we have received tremendous support, including here in the Bonn city, the German government, IKI, BMZ, BMU, also supporting the work that we are doing.
Thank you. Then I think it's time to open our questions to the floor. So I would invite you to, if you just raise your hand if you have a question, we'll bring you a hand mic. I will collect some questions, and if you could just introduce yourself very briefly in one sentence before you put your question, that would be great. You will be, this is being recorded, it's being broadcast live on the internet and also recorded there, but your face will not be visible because the cameras are pointing this way, but your voice and your question will be heard.
Bring a pen. Yeah.
I hope I haven't put you off by mentioning the internet. There we go. Yes, gentleman at the back, thank you.
My name is Leo van der Vlist. I'm in the board of RLC International for the Stewardship Council. My question is, what is mostly needed to scale this up globally?
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Yes?
I'm Elizabeth from Unibon. My question goes to Mr. Tony. In Niger, most of the lands are deserted areas, so how is he able to water the trees since he has the reforestation areas? Is there any dam for the watering of the plants? So I just want to know the kind of.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Perhaps, yeah. That's fine. Two more, that's great, yeah.
Hello, my name is Dennis from work for Savings Bank Foundation for International Cooperation. And I wondered, you mentioned the issue of financing, and this is a big struggle in bringing the projects forward. Is microfinance playing a role in your project?
Okay, microfinance. And let's take one more.
Hello, Jacob Derks from the European Forest Institute. You mentioned that this technique works with tree species that copies easily. And if you have these tools, I suppose that they originate from either browsing too much or from harvesting firewood. So how do you, after pruning the trees, how do you protect them from further browsing or from use for fuel?
Sorry, what do you mean by browsing?
Like sheep and goats eating the bark.
Okay,
and
all right. Then, let's start with the first one.
What do we need to scale this up globally? What is the biggest thing that we need?
I would say the will. The will. The money's there. There's plenty of money in the world. The techniques are there. We just need the will.
Wycliffe? If it were that easy, that would be great.
Well, let me add to that. In Niger, once we released this idea, and I wasn't planting trees or regenerating trees, I was releasing an idea. Once it took root in people's minds, it spread at a rate of 250,000 hectares per year for 20 years. 5 million hectares, 200 million trees, just because of an idea. And that's why I say all we need is the will.
Wycliffe, do you see that similarly, or?
I think with commitments, particularly political goodwill, scaling up is very easy. I think we are seeing targets being set at the continental level. That gives more a structured approach, because we must also monitor and evaluate the Bonn challenge. We said by 2020 we want to do 150 million hectares. How much time is remaining? We are talking about next year, so we re-evaluate. There's also the target of 2030. So the scaling up, I think, with the institutionalization, we'll be able to see an increased activity in terms of the work that we are doing in forestation and landscape restoration.
Thank you. Then to the question of watering in Niger or similar regions, where does the water come from was the question?
Yeah, there's an interesting concept that we don't believe what we see what we believe. And many of these so-called desert landscapes in reality are altered landscapes. So in the distant past or even in the near past, they were forested. And in many cases, those forests still exist, but they're underground. We never watered a single tree because many of these tree stumps already have mature, very extensive root systems reaching groundwater, soil moisture, nutrients. They have stored sugars. And really, I come back to that issue. It's a matter of behavior change. If we allow those trees to grow, nature is self-healing. It knows how to do it if we will allow it. So we didn't have to water.
Okay, then let's come to the issue of finance. Microfinancing, does that play a role? Wycliffe?
There are other interventions that we have on clean energy, because clean energy is critical in afforestation issues. When we adopt better cooking technologies, it's equated to saving more trees in the landscape, but it is also promoted as a health product. And there we are seeing a lot of increased activity with some finance institutions getting into the value chain, either at production level and helping other women at the grassroots through the last mile distribution receive these products. But the work of the environment is one through passion and persistence. And one of the values the Green Belt movement has been propagating is volunteerism. People are able to volunteer for the good of the environment, even for the good of the future. And we can never be able to compensate enough. So we only give a token of appreciation. And within our model, it is a self-financing, because for every benefit the women receive, the youth group receive, it is plowed back. And that makes our tree planting programs more sustainable. And therefore, yes, the seeds fund or the seed capital we receive either from other donors or from our own sources, it always plowed back to make sure that there's regeneration and continuity of the work that we do.
Tony?
Yes, sure. So I don't have any standalone reforestation projects. They're always complementary with water and sanitation or economic development, microloans, maybe an agricultural component, because you're dealing with people who have immediate needs, and it would be preposterous to expect them to devote their time to regenerating or planting a forest when they're hungry or when they can't afford medicines for their children or school fees. And so these projects complement each other and work together.
Okay, does that answer your question? And the last in this round was after the pruning. This was for you specifically then, how you are going to protect and look after those trees.
I always get that question.
Gardener's question time. No?
I never met a goat or a cow in Africa that wasn't owned by someone. And if I can assist the owner to comprehend, they will have a better life if they manage those livestock differently. Then they know very well whether they will tether their animals and cut and carry their forage, or whether they will choose to graze in another location while the trees are still vulnerable. They will know what to do once they're convinced it's in their best interest. And so we talk of social fencing. I never bought a piece of wire for reforestation. It's a waste of time and money. Within 2-3 years of project closure, you'll find that wire cut and turned into, you know, the little tourist vehicles that children sell you, and the fences will get broken down. But social fencing is so much stronger. The fear of ostracism in the community because you cut that tree down or you let your goats in there is so great that it works.
Okay, that's interesting, yeah. Do we have some more questions? Down, lady at the back and gentleman over there.
Well, I come from South America, so I would like to know a little bit about the forest conditions, in which area are you working, so were you working, like what kind of forest type that was, and for your project of reforestation and restoration, how many species did you use? How which species are for this?
Thank you very much for the Institute of Food and Resource Economics, Bonn University. So I have two interventions. So firstly, I'll be building on from the last question. What species of trees are you planting? And do you take into account the usefulness of these trees and the potential of these trees after maybe 30 years? I'm speaking from the perspective of some trees which were introduced in Ethiopia, Tanzania, 30 years ago in the 80s to curb deforestation and improve on land degradation and soil erosion. And over time, these trees have become quite invasive, and it's now affecting a lot of livelihoods of the rural communities. Do you take that into account while building this theory of change? And my second question is, what is the perception of the rural communities? Are they supporting your initiative? And if yes, why are they supporting the initiative? Are they doing it for the protection of the environment, which you are seeing? Are they supporting your plans, or are they seeing your initiative just to improve their livelihoods? By their livelihoods, I mean cutting down the trees in no time again and selling for fuel wood. And as an addition to this, what is the role of host governments? Like someone asked the question of scaling up this initiative. So what is the role of the government in bringing forth your initiatives across? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have some more questions? Yeah, please.
Thank you. I'm Matika from European Forestry Institute. I was wondering, you mentioned that will is the most important to reforest the world. So do you think it's possible to reforest the whole Sahara? It's because you're microplanting, but on how big of a scale do you think that will be possible? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Interesting one. Yeah, and another over here.
Thank you very much for your inspiring words. Lucas Thiessen with the European Forest Institute. I was wondering, we are working at the intersection between scientific research, applied research, and practical questions. My question to both of you would be, how has your work been perceived by researchers and scientists, and distinguishing maybe between those from the global north, maybe versus or like in the global south, and with regards to before and after your award-winning periods of time, if there are differences. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's take those before we go any further. Why don't we stay with the last researchers and scientists reacted? Do they react differently in the global north or the global south? And has the award of the Right Livelihood Award made any? Wycliffe, would you like to start?
Thank you so much. Knowledge is power, and knowledge is good. For the work of the Green Belt movement, we have had to incorporate technology to disseminate, to document our best practices for wider sharing. We are using GIS. But again, we are also given an opportunity. We have an internship policy where we are collaborating with students not only from Africa, but also from Canada and other jurisdictions who are very keen to come and learn from our approach and also collect data for their work, career work. And therefore, there's so much at the moment going on. I mentioned that we have Wangari Maathai University or Institute. That's also bringing in the experience, the academic nexus of the type of work that we are doing. And we form the basis for that type of research. So quite interesting from all the key factors looking at energy, water, soil, and the different cycles, including nutrient cycles. We are having a lot of interest, people wanting to see from our case studies. And we are part of a national restoration movement within the country. We have come together, brought in researchers together to form the National Restoration Secretariat.
Yeah, in my case, it's been a very interesting journey, and while there's a lot of scientific interest and research going on at the moment, it wasn't always the case. And my thought is that it's to do with assumptions. And so here's this process, it's farmer managed, and therefore perhaps it's not scientific, perhaps it's not modern, and it's not valid. It's natural regeneration, and we all know that exotic, selected and well-bred species are superior. Whereas in reality, if you go back not very long ago, people's supermarket, hardware store, medical pharmacy and so on was in the forest. And so the reality is it's actually very, very useful. And thirdly, the killer is it's low cost, so it must be cheap. And these attitudes, I think, really affected willingness to research this, but that's not the case today. And there's a lot of research going on in the World Agroforestry Centre, in various national research centres, and the situation's changed.
Mm-hmm. And in the rural communities themselves was another question. Is there support for these initiatives from the point of view of protecting the environment, or is it rather just a case of livelihood, basically survival, and well, we have to cut the trees, we will cut the trees to survive?
As far as I can tell, I believe the initial interest and adoption was out of need, and it was definitely meeting basic needs for food and fibre and fuel with an income. Over time, it's amazing that even very poor people have this appreciation for nature, the intrinsic value of nature. And there's a quote from a lady in Senegal, lady farmer, and she said, sometimes the changes that I see in my farm pushes me to just go to the farm and appreciate the trees and the environment. And if any of you know anything about third world farming, that lady's either lost her mind or there's been a transformation. The only thing that pushes people to the farm is hunger and need. But she said, no, I just go there to appreciate the trees and the environment. So I think there's been this process of change. And even, anyone that sleeps on the ground, they hate snakes, and understandably. I was in northern Ghana, and they took me to their little forest. They were so proud. They had a python. They brushed the grass away. They wanted me to show this python.
Wycliffe. Did you? How did you react to the python?
Oh, well, pythons are pretty slow moving. I was okay with it.
Okay, yes, Wycliffe.
I wanted to comment on a question on species. I think it is quite critical in the work that we are doing because we have an objective of restoring the indigenous forest, naturalness, habitats, because this enhance biodiversity. And we are very careful in our approach because we believe that in landscapes, different landscapes, we have different species adapted. And that's where they provide the environmental goods and the services. So yes, we are focusing on indigenous, but again we guide. The Green Belt movement has employed foresters, graduate foresters, who work with community volunteers, and they are able to guide so that the results and the work that we are doing is ecologically balanced and in the future more sustainable. So we do a lot of species matching, and we have come to appreciate that even the communities have so much knowledge on seed management and propagation and raising the planting stock. So we are careful about species selection and matching to different restoration solutions.
Tony, the species.
Yeah, so in the case of farmer-managed natural regeneration, you're actually regenerating the original species and vegetation. However, farmers do demand certain tree species for planting, so valuable fruit trees like mango, in some cases teak and mahogany, so they're not known to become invasive. So that I believe there is a place for planting trees, but of course you need to be careful. It's very interesting to me. One of the weedy species that's taken over thousands of hectares in East Africa is the very thorny mesquite, Prosopis juliflora, and it's become an absolute nuisance. If you apply the same principles of thinning and pruning and managing that growth, you can simultaneously profit from what you harvest, so charcoal, fuel wood, even building poles. You can have beekeeping industry because they're very good flowers. You can convert the pods to livestock fodder. So as you manage it, you can actually make money of it and even use it to restore the original vegetation, whereby in a step-by-step process, you gradually eradicate it through over-harvesting and encourage the natural vegetation to come back.
Sounds like a win-win.
Yeah, well, you won't beat it. Even in the US, where it's a pest, they spend something like $20 million a year on spraying it and bulldozing it, and it's still there. It's better to work with the thing, it's already there. And how can we benefit while we gradually phase it out?
Right, yeah. And then let's come to the big question. Can we reforest the Sahara? Is it just a question of where there's a will, there's a way? And also to the issue of what we do to the microclimate when we turn dry lands into forests. Tony?
Yeah.
So I have a rule of thumb that if there was a forest there in the past, theoretically you should be able to restore one. I wouldn't bet that I could reforest the whole of the Sahara, but it's simply amazing in what appears to be pure sand and endless waste, what's there. And if you Google even the rural areas of Abu Dhabi, Dubai, which receive less than 100 millimeters of rain, Jordan in the south, there's these little bushes that look exactly like the bushes that I came across in Niger 30, 40 years ago. And if you were to investigate, maybe some of those bushes are trees. And I've gone, some of them are trees. I've been in southern Jordan, I've been in those rural areas. So parts of the Sahara at least, if you had the buy-in of the people who utilize that land. So there's still grazing, there's still cutting for fuel wood and perhaps timber. If you had their will and their understanding, theoretically you could restore it. It's very, very interesting. One of my heroes, have you ever heard of Richard St. Barbie Baker? He was an Englishman in the Colonial Forest Service. And he wrote a book called Sahara Conquest, and they traversed in 1924, traversed from Algeria through to Niger. And in the middle of the desert, Tamanrasset, which today there's hardly a tree in sight, on the edge of the city, it might have been a town back then, there were chips of wood from the cutting of trees. And so I've never been to Tamanrasset, but if those stumps are still alive, they have the potential to regenerate.
Wycliffe?
Thank you. I think as I answer that question, I think also as one of the respondents who want to know the different types of forests, particularly in Africa and Kenya. There are major 4 types of forest, but in Kenya we have about 3 that are more predominant. We're having the 10 types of forest based on altitude. There are also the lowland forest, but also there are also forests that we call trust forests that are under different types of management. There is also a unique type of forest, the tropical forest, one that huge that stretches all the way to Congo. It's a relic that's remaining, particularly in Kenya. What is the magnitude? What are we talking about when we say, can we restore sub-Saharan or sub-Saharan East Africa? 1.96 billion hectares. This is the area we are looking at. And that comprises about 30% of all the drylands. This is the area in Africa that we are talking to green. We are thinking, yes, it's a monumental task, but with proper technologies, mobilization, and zoning, I think we can contribute to mitigate the spread of the desert. Those of us who have been on the internet, at least every year, we are told Sahara is increasing by 6%. Therefore, it's a concern for the leaders and the communities to do something. And one of the solutions is tree planting and tree growing.
Could I address the microclimate question? Mm-hmm. So it's very, very interesting, and there's strong evidence that particularly in the path of certain jet streams that carry humid air from the oceans, if you have trees and an uneven surface that increases the turbulence and helps cloud formation and rainfall, you can progressively increase rainfall further inland. What we notice in Niger is this transition from a vicious cycle of degradation and poverty causing greater degradation as people try to survive into a virtuous cycle. And the longer the trees have been there, I was there earlier this year with Volker, the filmmaker, it was absolutely astounding. And so the trees themselves are putting more humidity into the air, they're cutting the wind speed, and at planting time, That's important. We were getting wind speeds of 60 kilometres per hour, sandblasting and burying the crops. That's been greatly reduced now. More organic matter on the soil. If the people value the trees, they're going to stop burning. And that's what they've done in much of Niger. So there's more organic matter. When it does rain, that rain is going to be held for longer and be more available for plants, but even for animals. And so I saw something that was very rare when I lived in Niger. They were free-range grazing chickens and guinea fowl. Because there was the organic trash on the surface of the ground, termites were coming up to eat that, and there was a food source for the chickens. But there's a whole lot of other implications. The termites dig tunnels down to where there's more moisture, and they bring that humidity up too. So there's this kind of virtuous cycle of improvement. Now, I don't know what the limits to that are. How much can you improve and how far into the desert? But there's enough evidence there that we should try pushing it as far as we can.
Thank you very much. Both of you, our time is just about running out. I'd just like to ask one question to each of you to give you an opportunity to sum up before we move on to continue informally next door over a glass of wine if you would like to talk to our experts then you will be very welcome to do that. But first, I recently interviewed Inga Anderson, the new head of UNEP, the UN Environment Programme, based in Nairobi, and she suggested to me that Africa could become an example for the rest of the world. She said they can leapfrog the polluting age, and help change our economic model, so building a more sustainable society. So do you see that, and can the global north perhaps learn something from farmers in Africa when it comes to greening drylands, and even, as we saw in one of the film trailers, could Africa feed the world?
I definitely think so. So in the case of Wangari Maathai, she's an example to the world. She's inspired, Trees for the Future, and many other movements around the world. The Niger example has stimulated much interest in other countries, and people are picking this up, even because it's so intuitive and a very simple method. They just need to hear about it, read the basics, and they do it. If you go to Kigali, the capital of Rwanda, it's one of the cleanest cities in the world. How on earth can a developing country ban plastic bags, and a wealthy country like Australia only recently enacted a partial ban on some types of plastic? Africa can definitely lead the way. In terms of feeding the world, just through the restoration of that, it's 6 million hectares today, but when it was 5 million hectares, crop yields doubled. Food production increased annually each year by 500,000 tonnes, enough to feed 2.5 million people without irrigation, without fertilizers, without improved seed. So there's still room to increase on top of what they've done, purely by working with nature instead of fighting against it. And most farming systems across Africa are still they're not highly productive because they're not working with nature, and alternatively, they're not working with modern science either. So there's enormous potential to grow much, much more food without destroying more forest.
Wycliffe?
I think there is hope for the future, and just to echo the theme of this workshop, Greening the Future for Sustainable Agriculture and also dryland forestry. We believe that we are having a generation that is more informed with the right tools and knowledge to implement some of the interventions. We have seen, I think, within the last 2 days, what our researchers and our academics are doing. This is powerful. This will be the game changer with the technologies and with the right leadership. I appreciate the Deputy Mayor who is here. In our country, Kenya, we are having county governments, but not so much passionate the way Bonn is. Other continents, we are talking about food sovereignty, food security, nutritional security. But from the images you see from Africa, I think we are not there. Our factors are different. Perhaps we look at a meal security, and so most of the population there don't have the access to the nutritious food. So in terms of conservation, yes, but in terms of food, we need to do more to encourage production.
All right, Tony Rinaudo and Wycliffe Matika, thank you very much for a very stimulating evening. On behalf of the Right Livelihood College, I'd also like to thank the City of Bonn and the German Academic Exchange Service for their support. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming along and joining in the discussion, and invite you once again to join us over a drink and carry on the debate. Thank you very much for coming.